Good evening, everybody. How is everyone this evening? I hope you're well and warm. So, we're back in winter again in Alberta, and not just any winter, we've got a polar vortex, which is awesome. So, this video is kind of a refresher on hydration and dehydration considerations in the extreme cold. Many of you might remember in this group, it was either October or November, I did a video around dehydration considerations in extreme cold. And this is kind of a follow on from that. Plus, I'll go into a little bit more detail. Plus, we got a lot of new members. I've got a lot of new clients in here. So, there's no better time than now to discuss this because it is very, very relevant to right now. Especially, well, for many reasons, but for people who weigh themselves once a week, this is a really important consideration. Um, so I want to just kind of go over how hydration or dehydration works between winter and summer and how they differ. So in the summer, we are trying to cool down our body's temperature. And the way we do that is we will push out water to cool ourselves down. And this naturally encourages us to drink more as well. In the summer, I'm sure you all know we're more inclined to not only want to hydrate more, but we kind of consume more hydrating foods too, in the form of like our cucumbers, strawberries, salads, all that good stuff. Like we have more cooling foods in the summer. You throw in ice pops or popsicles, as you call them, and ice cream, milkshakes, all those really cooling foods in the summer. And because we're pushing out the water, we generally have more control in the summer of the water we're losing and we're taking in. And we pick up on these dehydration signals a lot more in the summer. And I think there's a big aspect of it that is just mental considerations around hydration in the summer. And I suppose maybe some fear, some people afraid of maybe fainting due to hyponatremia or something. If you have diverticulosis like I do, you'll know that in the summer you are going to be more prone to diverticulosis flares, and they can be very painful if you don't stay on top of your hydration in the summer. So, in the summer, it's more so we're pushing out the water and it's being replenished. And even though we generally have like a low grade sweat on all day when it's very warm, most people are not losing a ton of water, and that would include your minerals and electrolytes, unless like you're really sweating, like you're really pushing yourself in a workout or a hike or something. But again, we tend to have more control over that water loss and replenishment in the summer. Whereas in the winter, it's a completely different scenario that a lot of people do not consider at all. Um, and I cannot see the comments on my computer, so I can see them here on my phone. Lisa, hi. Jesse, hi. Margaret, hi. And there's someone else, but I can't see who you are. So, but in the winter, completely different consideration. And actually, most people don't even considerate that they sorry, it's Monday. Most people don't consider how dehydrated they actually can get in the winter, and how it's a lot worse than the dehydration you can experience in the summer in many instances. You see, in the winter, and especially these extreme cold snaps like we have now, and hopefully this only lasts a few days, but it's definitely something people need to be reminded of. And that's why I've done so many of these videos. This must be my fifth one of these, because people just forget it's like winter. No, I couldn't get dehydrated in the winter. Well, yeah, you totally could, and you're a higher risk of dehydration in the extreme cold than you are in the extreme heat. So in the winter, we don't have that control where we're controlling the amount of fluid we're losing, especially not in Alberta or even Saskatchewan, these very dry areas. Um, so the water actually is getting pulled out of us in the winter, which is super interesting, and you don't have control over that. So it's getting pulled out of your skin, your hair, your eyes, your eyelashes, your mouth. If you're a mouth breather, we know people who are mouth breathers lose 40% more water out of their mouth than people who are nasal breathers, but that's getting pulled out of your skin because of the dry air. So not only do you have the dry air outside, which is frigid dry air, that's attacking you, but then we have, and people forget this, they really do. We have the heat on all day, and in some cases all night, and heating and dry air and air conditioning is like really damaging to the skin and that fluid profile in your body, because we're just trying to stay warm and survive, but that air is pulling the water out of everywhere. So you have that going all day, every day. Now, I don't sleep with the heating on here because it drives me nuts. It's so noisy. But I know a lot of people keep the heating on all night, and I even know people who sleep with a fan on all night. And I do that sometimes in the summer, but I'm well aware that that is going to contribute to dehydration in the summer. But regardless, then you've got your in and out of your office or in and out of stores, and they have heating on full blast as soon as you step in. Then, if you're in your car, if you have a long commute, if you're stuck on Deerfoot for hours, well, you have the heating on in the car. So you're constantly getting the water pulled out of you, and you don't even realize it because you're just trying to stay warm and survive. Now, if you think about at night, if you're sleeping with the heating on all night, and that's what, 8 or 9 hours you're in the one spot, you're losing a lot of fluid there. And again, dry skin, there's a lot of reasons why we get dry skin and hair, but this dry air and pulling the water out is definitely a consideration here. Having a good moisturizer, like you can see me here shining, can help to some extent to create that a barrier to protect the skin. And now I know someone's going to ask me what moisturizer I use. But regardless, this is a really important consideration in the winter, because what's one thing I hear non-stop around the clock, and I even feel like a broken record saying it to people, but it's very valid. It's an important question to ask and be considered. It's constipation. The number one cause of constipation is dehydration. It's not lack of fiber, it's dehydration, followed closely then by hypothyroidism and then any structural issues there. But dehydration is the number one cause of constipation. And usually, and many of you will be nodding that, yeah, she's right, when I increase my fluids, bowel movements improve and become more regular. Well, you have to consider, if you're constipated now, but maybe you're staying on top of your fluids. So let's say your general target in normal weather is 3 liters of fluids. So fluids would include everything you drink. Then you consider, well, okay, that's a normal day. I'm drinking 3 liters of fluid to keep everything regular. But now I'm in the extreme cold, and I'm also sleeping with the heating on all night. So there's a lot of water being pulled down my body. At least I'm going to have to increase my fluids by a liter, if not 1.5 liters, which is a lot, which is why I say fluids. So we can consider soups, smoothies, shakes, everything, not just water, because there's only so much water you can drink. And that's also another consideration, that if you drink too much plain water, then you're going to dehydrate or dilute your electrolytes and minerals even more, and then that opens Pandora's box, and we have a whole host of other issues there. But constipation is number one, then followed by people with headaches. Well, the first thing I always ask people with headaches is, how was your hydration yesterday? That's a huge factor. And then, of course, hormones would be next, and how did you sleep and all that. Um, so, some other symptoms that you're dehydrated in this weather, like right now in this weather, um, aches and pains. One, if you've got increased pains, systemic inflammation, neck tension, shoulder tension around your traps, and that headache, even tenderness here on the auxiliary nerves at the back of your neck, that's going to be dehydration. Um, Obviously, you've got the dry eyes and mouth, but people never stop to recognize dry nose. Like, does your nasal cavity feel dry? Do you find yourself doing this or blowing your nose to make it moist? That is a big indicator of dehydration. Then we've got brain fog is a big one with dehydration because you've got that increased neuroinflammation. So brain fog, poor memory recall, or poor performance. Um, that's a big indicator that there's dehydration there. Then you can have gastric issues, not in the sense of constipation, like I said, but some people will get gastric flares. So if they have ulcerative colitis or diverticulosis, like I mentioned, or just IBD, like just a generalized irritable bowel, you can get a flare and it'll start to spasm and be really painful. And in some instances, you will flush. So you'll get diarrhea because of that stress response. Your body's just so stressed, it'll flush. Then what we can get with dehydration, which people are always mind blown by, is you'll actually get fluid retention because it's part of the stress response. Your body's almost like saying, oh shit, we're in the Sahara Desert now. Like, we're totally shriveling up like a prune. There's no water here. We got to hold on to as much water as we can. And part of that is increasing the body's mucus that you can't see. And I spoke about this last week in regards to thyroid function. But you're trying to retain fluid because, again, you're in the Sahara and your body's trying to survive. So we will see people start to notice like swelling in their legs, their ankles, their hands. Their wedding ring will get really tight, and even the eyelids will start to puff up. So if you wake up in the morning and your eyelids are super puffy, and even the black bags under your eyes, that's your body saying that you're dehydrated and you need to replenish lost fluids. And fluids, not just water, all fluids. There are instances where people who are very dehydrated, and obviously everyone is different, there's bio individualities everywhere, but they'll get dizzy or they'll experience vertigo from that dehydration and the mineral imbalance there. Then there is the scale. If you are very dehydrated, I have to laugh at this every time. If you are very dehydrated and you step on the scale and the scale is up, but everything else was on point, you have to consider that your body is highly stressed and it's retaining fluid, and there is an inflammatory response involved there. That is going to affect the scale whether or not you like it. But if you're dehydrated and you step on the scale on Saturday and you have not pooped until Tuesday and the scale is up, please don't tell me you don't know why the scale is up, because that's pretty obvious. Like, you haven't pooped since Tuesday. As I said to a client earlier, if you did poop on a scale after not pooping for 4 days, as gross as that is to imagine, how much do you think that would weigh? Like, seriously. And this has happened. This has happened. So you absolutely have to take this into consideration. You know, sometimes that even having clients check in during this kind of weather is challenging for me, because I spend half of my time trying to convince people that's not body fat. And there's a lot to be considered, obviously, when you are checking in or monitoring progress on a health journey. It's not just the scale. Um, but at this time of the year, you have to consider all these different variables. Another thing that I notice, not in all of my clients, but in some of my clients that are very dehydrated, they will not sleep well because their body is so stressed, like they have a heightened stress response. This will happen to me. And I suppose if I was to think about this now, it is in a body that gets pushed to perform a lot. And then that dehydration is just enough to tip that body over the ledge into a heightened stress response, and it will mess with my sleep. So this is not super common, but it does happen to people for sure. Oh, and then I suppose I'll start to wrap this up now. Dehydration will increase not only cravings, like specifically sugar cravings, because of the stress response, and part of the stress response in regards to the body losing a lot of fluid is trying to manage those blood sugars and keep the brain alive. And your brain's primary fuel source is sugar. No matter what anyone says, it is sugar. So you'll get increased cravings for that survival mechanism and the stress response, but also because you need water, you need electrolytes. Like, electrolytes are electricity, they're energy. You need water and electrolytes to make energy. So if you're dehydrated and you're starting to crash and your body's struggling to not like thrive, but to just get by on that day, then you are going to crave more sugar to help with that ATP and energy production process. But also, you can mess with the hunger satiety hormones, so people will overeat as well because of that blood sugar imbalance. It throws off the leptin and the ghrelin, so then people will have a tendency to overeat. And there's different considerations around overeating in extreme cold and metabolism and hunger and stuff like that, but dehydration for sure is a big factor there. So there's a lot, like, it's not just as simple as the dehydration or hydrate in the summer where you're naturally drawn to drink more and have those more refreshing, cooling foods in the summer. Like, it's second nature almost to us, but it's not in the winter. So with my clients, I don't just focus on water. I always say fluids. I'm always like, how much tea did you have? Did you have coffee? Did you have smoothie? Did you have shake? Did you have soup? What about chili, stew? Chia pudding is very hydrating. Did you have apples? Like, I'm thinking about everything that can hydrate my client, and electrolytes are like one of my favorite things to use with everyone, full stop. Like, me, my family, my kids, my husband, everyone, my clients, electrolytes are very important when it comes to metabolism and hydration. But this is like, I sound like and feel like a broken record asking people about hydration, but it's so overlooked by so many people. So I suppose if there was one other thing I would add in before I wrap this up, would be that if you're really dehydrated and you're at a level where you're like, you haven't had a bowel movement in 3 or 4 days, that's highly problematic. At this stage, I want to do anything to get you having a bowel movement. I want you if you have an intolerance to like a lot of fat, where a lot of fat causes you to flush or have diarrhea, then I'm going to tell you to have a lot of fat. Or I'm going to ask you to have extra magnesium or vitamin C. In some cases, I'll tell people to have a smooth move tea or another laxative, because keeping the waste in the body for that long is more problematic than using a laxative. And if we do use a laxative, we make sure that we replenish the lost fluids from the laxative. That's something people don't do. They'll just have like that flush from the laxative, but they don't realize you should at least replenish that with some minerals and water. But if you have this waste sitting in your intestines or your colon for days and you're just uncomfortable and constipated, okay, you're uncomfortable and constipated, but you're also fermenting and putrefying that waste in your large intestine. That creates endotoxins, which will cross the gut lining and enter your bloodstream like really, really easily. Those in themselves, also known as lipopolysaccharides, they will increase systemic inflammation. And one of the first places they will target is your thyroid. So you can notice either inflammation of the thyroid or swelling of the thyroid or reduced thyroid function because you're so constipated. So I think I'll leave it at that. That's a scary point to end on, but hopefully scary enough to make you stay on top of your hydration for the next few days. Like, I see a couple of you watching me, Denise, Susan, Crystal. Like, we've had this conversation. This is very real and it happens so often to people. So, hopefully, this was helpful to you guys. That's pretty much all I have to say on this. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments and I will respond. Okay, bye everyone.